White versus Gerhardt Konig, 1 CPC-15-273, defendant is present in court with all four counts of the record. All jurors are back in the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Mr. Runner states the next witness.
Today calls Scott Henderson.
Mr. Henderson, can you stand? Raise your right hand, please.
You do solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Runner.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? Or, okay.
And as you go forward today, please speak into the microphone as much as possible. Okay?
Of course.
First of all, can you please state your name?
My name is Scott Henderson.
And Mr. Henderson, where are you employed?
I'm sorry, can I move this by any
Sure.
chance? It's a little distracting, sorry.
No worries.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Where are you employed?
I am employed at the Honolulu Police Department.
And how long have you worked for HPD?
I've worked there since 2013.
So it's about 13 years.
Yeah.
What position do you hold there?
I'm a criminalist in the forensic biology unit.
In order to be a criminalist at HPD, is there any training that you have to complete?
Yes, we have an internal training program before we can start on any type of casework that has to be completed.
I'm going to ask a couple follow-ups about that. How long is that training program?
The training program is approximately at least 6 months to a year, typically.
And does it include written and oral exams?
That's correct.
Does it include actual practice with casework?
No, not casework cases yet. When we get approved for finishing the training program, that's when we can start on actual casework samples.
Got it. And what are your duties or responsibilities as a criminalist?
So as a criminalist, I perform biological screening on items of evidence, do DNA interpretation and analysis on the DNA profiles obtained from those items, write reports, and testify in court.
Mr. Henderson, did you earn an undergraduate degree?
I did.
In what degree?
Bachelor's of Science in Biology
Where did you earn that degree from?
at the University of Hawaii.
At Manoa.
At Manoa, yes.
Have you earned any graduate degrees?
Yes, I have.
In what field?
This would be in molecular biosciences and bioengineering. It's a Master of Science.
Was that also at UH Manoa?
That was also at UH Manoa.
Have you received any specialized training in DNA testing?
Yes.
And since you started in 2013, was it about how many trainings have you attended?
At least 30.
And can you briefly describe the kind of training you've received?
The trainings come in the form of conferences, workshops, seminars, either in person or virtual, covering a variety of topics related to forensic DNA testing.
What kind of organizations do you receive these trainings from?
They can range. There's a lot of different organizations, ranging from the FBI to vendors that are related to the field of criminalistics.
When was the most recent training you attended?
I think earlier this year, beginning of the year.
In addition to this training for DNA testing, have you received any training in probabilistic genotyping?
Yes, I have.
First of all, before we get to that training, what is probabilistic genotyping?
So probabilistic genotyping is a way to approach DNA mixtures. It involves the use of biological models, statistical theory, as well as computer algorithms and probability distributions in order to separate the individual DNA profiles from of contributors from a DNA mixture.
You said there was computer algorithms for probabilistic genotyping?
That's correct. A lot of the, most of the probabilistic genotyping technology that's available is in the form of a computer program, software program.
What are some examples of probabilistic genotyping computer programs?
So the two main ones are called StarMix, and there's another one called TrueAllele.
When did you attend your first training in probabilistic genotyping?
2017.
And approximately how many hours of training have you received in probabilistic genotyping in general?
At least 200.
And if you could estimate approximately how many hours of training in a program called StarMix?
A little less, maybe about 150.
150 hours?
Hours, yes, sorry.
Are you a member of any professional organizations related to your work?
Yes, I'm a member of the American Board of Criminalistics.
Do you have any certifications related to your work?
Yeah, the American Board of Criminalistics provides certification.
And how do you get that certification?
You have to fulfill certain requirements, educational, experiential, and you must take an exam before you can be certified.
And what exactly are you certified in?
Molecular biology.
And can you describe for us what it means to be certified in molecular biology specifically?
This means that I have the required skills, knowledge, and expertise to perform forensic DNA analysis.
Okay. Now, in your workplace as a criminalist, what does the term forensic DNA testing mean?
Forensic DNA testing primarily involves obtaining a DNA profile from an item of evidence related to a crime scene, and then comparing that to any reference profiles of individuals also related to that.
About how many times have you performed forensic DNA analysis in your career?
Thousands.
About how many times have you used probabilistic genotyping?
Hundreds, at least.
Have you ever been qualified to offer opinion testimony in court before?
Yes.
Approximately how many times?
I believe 9 times.
And specifically, have you ever been qualified to offer opinion testimony in court regarding probabilistic genotyping?
Yes, I have.
How many times for that specific issue?
1 time. It's a pretty new technology, so.
I was going to ask you later, but asking how new is probabilistic genotyping?
Could you
I'll rephrase.
rephrase that?
Sure. When did the Honolulu Police Department start using probabilistic genotyping?
We came online with probabilistic genotyping in December 2024.
Okay. And what of the programs that you mentioned earlier does HPD use?
So HPD uses the StarMix software program.
That same program you said you've done 150 hours of training in?
Yes, approximately.
At this point, Your Honor, the state is asking to qualify this witness under HRE 702 as qualified to provide opinion testimony in the area of forensic DNA testing with a subspecialty in probabilistic genotyping.
Mr. Otake.
Brief for dear.
Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. You
Hi.
mentioned HPD making the change to probabilistic, what's it called again?
Probabilistic genotyping.
And that was in late 2024?
That's correct, yes.
Why did HPD make that change?
We get audited every other year,
And what happened with the audit?
and so
Beyond the scope.
He was part of the, were you working there before 2024, sir?
You can go ahead and answer.
sure. We were audited in 2024, and part of this audit required us to replace a previous statistical method with a new method, and this new method is the StarMix program.
Because the old method, the way you guys were doing it was problematic to certain degrees during the audit, yes?
Yeah, the audit had what we call findings.
Yeah, bad findings, yes?
Well, and a finding is something that they would like the lab to address and possibly change in their procedures.
And you were working there before 2024, sir?
Yes, that's right.
And who did the audit?
The audit is performed by ANAB. It's a accreditation organization.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Do you have any objection?
No objection.
Okay. Then, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Henderson will be allowed to provide opinion testimony to you in the field of forensic DNA testing as well as probabilistic genotyping. Mr. Konig.
Following up on that, how long did it take HPD, or sorry, when did HPD start moving to use StarMix?
We've been kind of playing with the idea. As I mentioned earlier, I took my first probabilistic genotyping training in 2017. So this shift to this new technology in HPD and the FBU has been kind of beginning since then. And so the actual, what we call a validation study, was started around 2023 and took about a year until it went online.
Okay. All right. Is the DNA analysis and probabilistic genotyping results that you'll testify to today based on your training, experience, and education in the field of forensic biology?
Yes.
Are the conclusions regarding the DNA analysis and probabilistic genotyping that you'll testify to based on your training? Same question, I'm sorry. Are the conclusions you reach in this case accurate and reliable?
Yes.
Okay, and just to define those words, inaccurate, do you mean that they were the result of or based on established methods of examination, which are widely accepted as valid within your profession?
Yes.
Okay, and are those methods also widely accepted as valid by experts in your field?
Yes.
When we use the word reliable, do you mean that the results you achieved could be replicated or duplicated by following the same established methods that you followed in this case?
That's correct.
Okay. Taking a step back from this, where is the HPD main police station?
We're located on 801 South Beretania Street.
And are you familiar with a place called the Scientific Investigation Section?
Yes, I am.
What is that?
It is located in the basement of that particular building. It provides forensic services, a number of forensic services, which includes forensic DNA analysis by the Forensic Biology Unit.
Okay. You just mentioned the Forensic Biology Unit. Is that the unit that you're in at
That
FBS?
is the unit I am in, yes.
Okay. Since we've talked about it already, when was the Forensic Biology Unit last accredited?
The last reaccreditation, so the Forensic Biology Unit has been accredited since 2001 continuously. I'd just like to point that out. We do go through a 4-year cycle of reaccreditation where within the 4 years, the laboratory is audited twice during that time. And we've always been reaccredited. So the last reaccreditation was in 2024.
When you say continuously, has there ever been a break in the accreditation status?
No,
So always been accredited.
we've always been accredited, yes.
And what's the significance of being accredited as a lab?
What this means is that the laboratory is compliant with national as well as international standards for forensic DNA testing.
And what does the Forensic Biology Unit do to maintain its accreditation status?
As I mentioned before, we are audited approximately every other year.
Does the Honolulu Police Department Forensic Biology Unit have standard operating procedures for DNA testing?
Yes.
Does that include standard operating procedures for the use of probabilistic genotyping?
Yes, that's correct.
Why does HPD have these standard operating procedures?
The point of standard operating procedures is that performing the procedures, these particular procedures, ensures that the results that we obtain and the conclusions that we can give to triers of fact is accurate, reliable, as well as reproducible.
And are you familiar with the HPD standard operating procedures yourself?
Yes, I am.
I'm going to ask you a couple questions about terminology used in DNA comparisons, okay?
Yes. Okay.
Right. In DNA testing, what is a question sample?
So a question sample refers to a sample that is taken from an item of evidence related to a crime scene. A DNA profile is then obtained from that sample for analysis and testing.
What is a known sample or reference sample?
So these are different, fundamentally different types of samples. So these are taken from individuals, their profiles taken from individuals related to the case. So we can say that that profile that we obtained, that reference profile, came from that specific individual.
And I'm sorry, I got to clarify. When you said these are fundamentally different, do you mean that question samples are fundamentally different from known samples or reference samples? Or do you mean that known samples and reference samples are fundamentally different?
I'm sorry. Question samples and known samples or reference samples they are fundamentally different in terms of, so I may not have mentioned about the question samples. We don't know who the contributors are to the question samples. That's a fundamental difference from who we know is the contributor of, let's say, the reference sample.
All right. And then how does the DNA comparison process work?
So what we do is we get a DNA profile, a questioned DNA profile from the question sample. We perform analysis on it, interpretation, and then from using that, we can make comparisons to any of the reference samples that might have been submitted for that particular case. These comparisons, if applicable, can have a statistical weight calculation put on them on that type of comparison. We'll make a conclusion based on that, and then we'll put it in our DNA report.
In this case, Mr. Henderson, did you perform DNA comparisons between the question samples and the known reference samples?
That's correct.
And before getting into any results, how did you do that?
So, like I said before, we do have a probabilistic genotyping software program, StarMix. So what we'll do is we'll evaluate our question sample to see if it's suitable for use in the StarMix program. If they are, so suitable profiles are interpreted using the StarMix software, and it also helps us with the comparison after that. So when we compare it to the reference samples, a calculation on the statistical weight of that comparison is performed, and then from there we can make our conclusions and report it.
Okay. How widespread is the use of StarMix by crime labs across the country?
I believe there's approximately 100 labs that have gone online with StarMix.
And do you know how widespread probabilistic genotyping is beyond just the StarMix program?
Internationally, I think there's maybe 30 that have come online with it.
Okay. And I'm sorry, maybe clarification. Beyond just the use of StarMix, how widespread is probabilistic genotyping, including other programs?
That's foundation projection.
If you know.
I'm sorry, I actually don't have a particular number. Somewhere above that.
Speculation.
No, it's the same.
We'll move on. And one more time, how long has HPD been using StarMix?
We've been using StarMix since 2023 when we started our validation studies.
What is a validation study?
So validation is a way to demonstrate that a procedure or technology such as StarMix is can be used and it demonstrates that it is a useful technology and it serves its intended purpose. There's two types actually. Developmental validation, which is performed by the developer, manufacturer of that particular technology. And there's also internal validation, which is performed by the laboratory that wants to bring online that particular, in this case, technology, StarMix.
Okay. So which type of validation study out of those two you just mentioned, which type did HPD do?
So the FBU performed an internal validation study for StarMix.
How long did that take?
We started in 2023 and we came online in at the end of 2024. About approximately a year.
Okay. And then, did you participate in that validation study?
Yes, I actually did, yes.
Okay. Can you explain to us kind of what you were doing in the validation study, how it worked?
Sure, there's a number of different studies that we need to do. I guess maybe I can explain the point of the validation. So the point of performing a validation in the unit before you bring something online is what you want to do is you want to show that this particular technology can be used in our laboratory environment and produce the correct results. And so doing these studies allows the unit to develop the correct standard operating procedures that we would be using for these samples in actual casework in order to come up with the correct results and conclusions that we would be able to report in our DNA reports. And
during the validation study, did yourself and the other people participating calibrate the StarMix system at all? Is that a right word to use?
The validation study, maybe you could kind of think about that as like a calibration. There's no actual calibration that's done on the system itself necessarily.
Did you use historical data from the Honolulu Police Department FBU in the validation study?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
And when I say historical data, that's essentially old casework data from the DNA testing, is that right? I'll strike.
I would say most of the validation study was not necessarily samples used from old casework. There might have been for training purposes or that matter. A lot of the data was generated from testing of known samples primarily.
Got it. Okay. Has the use of StarMix by HPD been reviewed by any outside agencies?
Yes, it has.
Which agencies?
It was reviewed by a company called Sorensen Forensics, who provides a review of labs' validation studies. They're online with StarMix themselves.
Okay. And what was the result of that review?
The result was that the lab performed the validation appropriately and comprehensively.
When you're actually doing the StarMix analysis, now that it's been validated, now that it's in place, is that StarMix analysis done in-house at HPD or off-site?
It's done in-house.
Going back a little bit to the StarMix trainings you mentioned, which company or organization provided the trainings that you attended that were approximately 150 hours?
The trainings that the company provided specifically for StarMix didn't count for the whole 150 hours, but I would say the majority of it. This company is the developer of StarMix. They're called, at the time they were called ESR, or Institute of Environmental Science and Research. I believe they've since changed their name to PHF Science.
So, just to clarify, at least some portion of those 150 hours was training from the developer of the program.
That's correct.
During that training, did you learn how to identify if the program is operating properly?
That's correct, yes.
In your work on this case, did you operate the StarMix program in accordance with your training
Yes.
and also in accordance with the SOPs developed by the validation study?
That's correct, yes.
Based on your training and experience and following the SOPs, was the StarMix program operating properly when you used it in this case?
Yes, it was.
When you actually do use StarMix to run DNA profiles through, how is any association or comparison between a question sample and a known sample, how is that reported?
So this is reported through the use of a statistical calculation. We call this a likelihood ratio, or LR.
Could you kind of explain for us what likelihood ratio means?
So a likelihood ratio is a statistic that tells us the weight of this comparison. It's made up of the comparison between two opposing scenarios or propositions. So the first scenario, scenario one, typically argues that the DNA originated from a person of interest. And this person of interest, when we refer to this a person of interest or POI, this would be the reference sample that we're making the comparison to. The second scenario is the opposite of that. So the DNA profile came from some unknown individual. And so the likelihood ratio is a calculation of specifically the probability of observing the DNA profile given scenario one over or divided by the probability of observing the DNA profile, the question DNA profile, given scenario two. So what that tells us is how much more likely it is to observe the DNA profile under the comparison between each scenario, one scenario versus another.
Okay. With the use of a likelihood ratio, is the word match ever used in DNA comparison?
No.
Okay. What does a likelihood ratio higher than 1 mean?
So since this is a value divided by a value with the support for scenario one usually in the top part of that equation, if there's support for scenario one, we would see likelihood ratios higher than 1.
Okay. And what does a likelihood ratio lower than 1 mean?
So likelihood ratios lower than 1 would be the opposite of that, or support for the second scenario.
And is it fair to say the first scenario is inclusion?
We would consider, we would refer to that support as support for inclusion.
And then on the other side, the likelihood ratio lower than 1, what's the term you would use that would support that?
That would be support for exclusion.
Are there any procedures or standards on how the Honolulu Police Department reports likelihood ratios?
Yes.
And I'm going to approach for visual aid purposes with what's been marked as State's Exhibit 139 and 140. Mr. Henderson, I've handed you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 149 and 140.
139.
I'm sorry, 139 and 140. Are these the charts that HPD uses to demonstrate likelihood ratios?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And these are based on HPD standards for how to report likelihood ratios?
Yes, it is.
Would those be helpful kind of in explaining your testimony today?
I believe so, yes.
Then, Your Honor, at this point, the state would ask permission to publish 139 and 140 as visual aids only.
Proceed.
Okay, we've put states 139 on the screen, Mr. Henderson. Could you explain to us kind of what we're looking at here and how it applies to using a likelihood ratio in the work that you do?
So what you see on the left side, the left column, is a representation of a range of likelihood ratios in each row. The likelihood ratio is a number since it's a ratio of values. And starting at the top, we have high likelihood ratios going all the way down to much lower, likelihood ratios less than 1. On the right side of this is what we call verbal qualifiers, which are an attempt to give the triers of fact a reference point to kind of help them figure out what the number actually might mean. Might be a little hard to see the colors, but we've color coded them where green represent likelihood ratios greater than 1, and for each range of likelihood ratios, we provide a verbal qualifier. And so this all shows up in the report for each likelihood ratio that we give. And so at the very top, you see 1 trillion, which is actually a reporting cap that the forensic biology uses. And so the very top 2 rows, those ranges of likelihood ratios, if we report those likelihood ratios, we would give the verbal qualifier very strong support for inclusion, which is support for scenario 1. As you go down in range of lower likelihood ratios, the verbal qualifier becomes less strong, so it goes down from very strong support for inclusion to strong support, moderate, and limited support for inclusion. If you can imagine 2 numbers that are divided by each other, which is the likelihood ratio, if their support for scenario 1 and scenario 2 is equal, you would get a number 1. So in yellow, what that tells us is that numbers approximately 1 don't give us support for either scenario 1 or scenario 2, so we would report that as uninformative. As you go below the value of 1, that goes into support for exclusion. That's color-coded in red. So that starts at limited support for exclusion and becomes stronger into moderate support, and finally outright exclusion. These are for values of less than or equal to 0.0001. They can also be for not applicable, where a exclusion was done outside of the StarMix program, which is possible to do in certain circumstances.
Okay, I'm going to follow up on that last bit at the end there. When you say there's an exclusion done outside the StarMix program, what do you mean by that?
So the circumstances I was talking about were what you can have is what we call a single source profile from a single individual. When you have situations like that, an analyst can look at that profile, determine that it's from a single individual, and then they can look at the reference profile and make a comparison. If those 2 profiles are distinctly different from each other, the analyst can conclude that the comparison is an exclusion. So we would report that as exclusion. Particularly when in the report, it would show up as not applicable because StarMix was not actually run on it, although it was still an exclusionary conclusion.
Got it. All right, I'm going to now publish, I'm going to take State's Exhibit 1. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I get there, these color-coded green, yellow, red, are those colors also used in your report?
Yes, to help with just a quick glance, they're provided in tables, and so support for inclusion in these tables are color-coded with these particular colors.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to take down 139. I'm going to put up the second chart we talked about, 140. Okay, Mr. Henderson, could you help explain to us what this chart means in terms of how to understand a likelihood ratio?
So as I was saying before, right, it might be easier to let's maybe start at the middle. So that's the LR of approximately 1. So in the middle of this particular chart, we have an uninformative range. And as you go farther and farther away on each side, the support for either inclusion or exclusion becomes stronger. And so this chart is an attempt to, it's kind of saying the same basic as the idea as the previous chart, but it lets the reader understand, hopefully, that the larger the likelihood ratio on either side, so the closer it is to 0 from 1 is more excluded, and on the other side of that, the closer away the likelihood ratio is above 1, supports more inclusionary, it provides more inclusionary support.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I'm going to take Exhibit 140 down for now. Okay, and one thing you mentioned with one of those exhibits was something called a reporting cap.
Yes, that's correct.
What is that?
So in our report, we will only report up to 1 trillion as the likelihood ratio for support for inclusion. 1 trillion is 1 followed by 12 zeros. It's a very large number. However, actual likelihood ratios that are calculated that have certain support for inclusion can be much higher numbers than 1 trillion. That can quickly lose meaning for somebody reading it if we were to report the names of very large numbers. So the FBU decided to keep a reasonably understandable number as the highest number that we'll report. And the verbal qualifier would be the same, very strong support for inclusion.
Thanks for explaining that. In this case, Mr. Henderson, were you assigned to conduct DNA comparisons under HPD Report 25-110958?
Yes.
And how were you assigned to do your work on the case?
I was assigned by one of our case managers to perform the StarMix analysis on the case.
Okay. And if you could explain to us why you were chosen to do the StarMix analysis.
We have a small group of individuals, DNA analysts, that are trained to perform the StarMix analysis. At the time, as you previously heard, we just recently brought the technology online. And so the group of analysts that were brought online during that time, I was one of the group of those analysts.
Got it. So you were one of the ones qualified to use StarMix?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. In your work on this case, what were your known samples?
I had 2 reference or known samples, one from Arielle Konig and one from Gerhardt Konig.
Okay, and was Arielle Konig as item number 24?
I'm not 100% sure. I might.
When you're not the one doing the actual DNA testing, do you look at the item numbers?
We do, but I don't have the report in front of me, so I wouldn't be able to definitely confirm or not.
No problem. If you do need to review your report later in your testimony, you can look at the binder behind you on the shelf back there.
Okay, thank you.
All right. As part of HPD's regular standard operating procedures, is the DNA analyst or StarMix analyst required to document their work in each case?
Yes.
Why is that done?
Documenting our work allows for, upon review, any type of, it shows that we're following our standard operating procedures.
Got it. And as part of the HPD standard operating procedures, are all reports and documentation independently reviewed by a separate DNA analyst?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and what's that review process called?
That's called the technical review.
In this case, did you document your work as required by the SOPs?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And was your report in one report or multiple?
In this particular case, there were 2 reports, what we call requests, so 2 separate requests.
And did both of your reports and documentation go through the tech review process?
Yes, they did.
All right. And did your report contain charts that summarize the results of your comparisons?
Yes.
Would the parts of those charts that actually contain the results of your work be helpful in explaining your testimony today?
Yes, it would.
Okay. I'm going to approach with what's been marked as State's Exhibit 141 through 155, again for visual aid purposes. Okay, Mr. Henderson, do you recognize what those reports are, or what those documents are?
Yes.
Okay, and these are the charts that you said would be helpful in explaining portions of your testimony?
That's correct.
Okay. Give me just a moment. Okay. I'm going to publish now 141. Okay. And Mr. Henderson, could you explain the results of your probabilistic genotyping testing with regards to sample the stain on item number 2, question sample 1?
So at the very top of that, this particular figure, that is a description of the item of evidence and sample that we obtained the question profile from. So that would be a rock, which is apparently sample 1 of 2, a stain, and the number next to that is just kind of a unique identifier that we would use to identify that particular sample. So 2105230 Q1.
Okay.
I can
keep going.
Keep going. Sure. So a little bit farther down, what we see is what we call the probabilistic genotyping table, or PG table. This contains the results of the comparison as well as any assumptions that we used when we set up the interpretation and put it into the StarMix software program. That first section of the table, we state our number of contributors. So in this case, there was one contributor. There's another section that refers to any assumed contributors, which this one didn't have any in particular. Then it states the 2 scenarios that were compared. So scenario 1 is the POI contributed DNA. So if you recall from before, the POI refers to the person of interest. The second scenario is scenario 2, which is one unknown individual contributed DNA. So one unknown individual, since we're assuming a single contributor, we would say one unknown individual and that's somebody that's not the POI, somebody we don't know.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt
yes.
because I have a couple follow-up questions before we get to the results. When you say assumed number of contributors, how do you assume that, or how do you get to that number?
So what we do is we obtain the DNA profile from what we call typing results. We're trained to look at that DNA profile, and it's the characteristics that we see in that profile. And what we can tell from that is we're trained to determine how many contributors might have contributed to that DNA profile itself. Sometimes it's fairly obvious, usually in terms of a single individual. But if you can imagine, it might get a little bit more complex as the number of contributors to a profile increases.
How many contributors can HBD analyze using StarMix?
So StarMix is validated up to 4 contributors.
At what point does what number of contributors do you have where you get what's called a complex mixture?
So a conclusion that a mixture might be too complex would be greater than 4.
Got it. Okay. Moving on to the second line underneath the number of contributors, the assumed contributors. When would you assume a contributor?
Since there's only one contributor, we can't make any assumptions on who might be in that profile. So we're typically starting with profiles of 2 or more contributors. If certain conditions are met, the type of sample where it came from, who it might have come off of, if those conditions are met, then what we can do is use one of the reference sample profiles, and allow StarMix to use that sample at the beginning of its interpretation. That's what we call conditioning, or we refer to it as an assumed contributor. And so after that interpretation, when we make our comparisons, since we're already assuming that contributor is in the profile, we would only make comparisons to any reference profiles left that we haven't made any comparisons to yet.
I think I'll come back to that a little bit later, but next follow-up question. When you say person of interest, who is a person of interest in terms of this type of DNA probabilistic genotyping analysis?
So the person of interest refers to any of the reference profiles that we've made a comparison to. So in this particular case, we had 2 reference profiles, one from Arielle Konig and the other from Gerhardt Konig. So we made 2 comparisons. The first comparison, the person of interest in that comparison is to Arielle Konig. And then the second comparison, the person of interest would be Gerhardt Konig.
And at least in terms of this profile, is there any, are you running each person of interest separately against the question sample?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So let's start with the line in green in the middle of this sheet. Who is the person of interest in that?
So in kind of the header has a green color to it. So the person of interest for this comparison on the very left-hand side is Arielle Konig. And the middle column is the reported likelihood ratio. And if you recall, I mentioned there's a reporting cap. So that likelihood ratio is reported as 1 trillion. So when we report the ratio as 1 trillion, we put an asterisk there. And basically that's saying that it's approximately 1 trillion. We've hit the reporting cap, so the actual likelihood ratio is some number larger than that. And then finally on the right-hand side, we provide the verbal qualifier, which is the level of support. So in this case, this comparison was very strong support for inclusion.
Okay. And again, you're comparing in this case, or in this specific example you've just gone through, you're comparing the swab from the stained side of the rock with Arielle Konig's reference sample.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Now, in the second result at the bottom of this table, can you walk us through that one?
So the second comparison is for the person of interest is Gerhardt Konig. And so the LR was reported as not applicable because this is a single source sample, and in this particular instance, a manual exclusion was performed. The likelihood ratio is reported as not applicable. It still is an exclusion, so we would say Gerhardt Konig is excluded from the DNA profile obtained.
Okay. So, using the verbal qualifier, what is the level of support for the proposition that Arielle Konig was the contributor of the sample on the stained side of the rock?
So, in our report, we would have all of this information. There's usually a conclusion statement that is a summary of all of the information above it. It would be these DNA these DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig is the contributor than if one unknown individual is the contributor. So this provides very strong support for inclusion.
Okay. Have we gone through everything on this specific result for this sample so far?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. I'm going to take Exhibit 141 down for now. And I'm going to prepare Exhibit 142. I'm going to show it to defense counsel.
Thank you.
I'm going to publish States Exhibit 142. Okay, Mr. Henderson, first of all, which sample are we talking about here?
So as you can observe from the top header, this would be also from the rock sample 2 of 2. It appears to be swabbing from an unstained area. And the unique identifier in this case would be 2105230A Q1.
Okay. Can you walk us through the assumed number of contributors?
So compared to the previous table, in this case, the assumed number of contributors is 2. So when we input the profile into StarMix, give the StarMix the mixture that we obtain, we tell it this is how many contributors we think were in the mixture. So it'll do the interpretation under the assumption of 2 contributors. In this case, also, we didn't have any assumed contributors, so that would be none. And because the number of contributors is 2, the scenarios change a bit. So the POI and one unknown individual contributed DNA. And for scenario 2 would be 2 unknown individuals contributed DNA.
Okay. And then could you walk us through the results of this with regards to person of interest, Arielle Konig?
So if you look at that very top, that first row, so what that means is the DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig and one unknown individual are the contributors, and if 2 unknown individuals are the contributors. And this provides very strong support for inclusion.
Okay. And then can you walk us through the results with regard to person of interest number 2, Gerhardt Konig?
So separately from the comparison to Arielle Konig, we did a comparison to Gerhardt Konig. So even though they're kind of next to each other, the comparison in this case is just for that one reference sample, Gerhardt Konig. And so kind of reading across, the DNA results are approximately 290 times more likely if Gerhardt Konig and one unknown individual contributed DNA than if 2 unknown individuals contributed DNA. This provides moderate support for inclusion.
Okay. And you made a point that, at least at this page of the chart, we're looking at each of these conclusions was reached separately. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you do any other analysis together?
So we have, based on our based on our SOPs, if we have a situation where there is two inclusions, inclusionary LRs, we would run them both as contributors at the same time, which we typically refer to as grouped comparisons.
Okay.
StarMix allows for this type of proposition.
And do the HBD SOPs also allow for this type of proposition?
Yes.
Okay. And were grouped comparisons included in the validation studies you mentioned earlier?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I'm going to take page 1 of Exhibit 142 down before I'm going to publish page 2. I'm not sure that there's
No problem. Thank you.
All right, publishing page 2 of States Exhibit 142. Okay. When we're talking about grouped comparisons, is this the result of your group comparison for this same sample we're talking about, the unstained area of the rock?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, could you explain to us what the results of that were?
So the assumptions are the same, but for this, there's just one LR that was calculated, and the proposition for this is that the POIs, so Arielle and Gerhardt Konig, contributed DNA versus two unknown unrelated individuals contributed DNA. The results for this are, the DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig and Gerhardt Konig are the contributors of the DNA than if two unknown unrelated individuals are the contributors of the DNA. This provides very strong support for inclusion. We also provide a statement because the LRs from the individual comparisons had different levels of support. We kind of caveat this statement to say that you have to consider that the individual LRs were different than each other in terms of the level of support, and so you need to be aware of that when you look at this particular LR for group comparisons.
Thank you for the caveat as well. I'm going to take States Exhibit 142 down. Okay. And I'm going to prepare Exhibit 143. While I'm preparing, can you explain what sample that States Exhibit 143 is referencing?
This appears to be white with brown stripes T-shirt. Sample 1 of 6. Stain on the exterior right armpit. Is that the correct
Yes.
exhibit?
If you need the sticker, it's on the back of the paper
okay.
as well, as I refer to exhibits.
Thank you.
Thank you. Showing to Defense Counsel 143 before publishing.
Thank you.
Great. Mr. Henderson, we're going to show you on the screen States Exhibit 143. Okay. Now, as you said before, this is the white with brown striped T-shirt, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And this is specifically the sample from the stain on exterior right armpit. Is that right?
That's correct. 13105-230Q1.
Okay. Mr. Henderson, do you actually examine, or did you look at any of the photos taken of where the locations of the swabs were?
I did, although I wouldn't recall what was in the picture at the moment.
No problem. Can I retrieve exhibit number 29? Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry. I'm going to hand you exhibit number 29. It's in evidence. Are you able to tell from this exhibit where the swabs were taken in relation to what's on the chart?
I can attempt to. I didn't actually do the sampling for this. Our other analyst that was, I believe, on the stand earlier did. But they do provide locations of their sampling as well as stickers that give unique identifiers that we can use to determine where the sampling might have taken place.
Okay, and then could you point to the sticker for 13Q1?
I believe 13Q1 is referring to this section of the T-shirt or
Thank you. And you
item.
could put States Exhibit 29 down for now. I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you for the rest of the samples to lift that exhibit up and show us where the sticker is as well, okay?
Okay.
All right. So now that you've shown us where this sample was taken from, can you walk us through your results starting from the assumed number of contributors?
So for this sample, the assumed number of contributors is 2. We didn't have any assumed contributors for this, so that's none. And the scenarios would be scenario 1, the POI and 1 unknown individual contributed DNA. Scenario 2 is 2 unknown individuals contributed DNA.
Okay.
Oh,
And
sorry, did you want me to continue?
I'll just ask a follow-up. With regards to person of interest number 1, Arielle Konig, what were the results of the swabbing from the sample that you just showed us on the shirt?
So the DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig and 1 unknown individual contributed DNA than if 2 unknown individuals contributed DNA. This provides very strong support for inclusion.
And could you explain the probabilistic genotyping results with regards to person of interest number 2, Gerhardt Konig, for the sample that you just showed us on the exhibit?
Sure. I'd like to just talk about this a little bit because it's a little bit different than the exclusion results that we saw in previous samples. So for this, we did do the comparison in StarMix. And the likelihood ratio that's reported is 0.000351. But in order for us to kind of be consistent with the way that we're reporting results for inclusionary statements, we take the inverse, what's called the inverse. So we take the LR and put it underneath. So 1 divided by that LR. It gives us a number, and so that number would be provided in the conclusion statement. Because we're kind of switching the LR and putting it on the bottom, we would read and it's an exclusionary result, we kind of switch our scenarios. So the way that would be reported would be the DNA results are approximately 2,840 times more likely if 2 unknown individuals contributed the DNA than if Gerhardt Konig and 1 unknown individual contributed the DNA. This provides moderate support for exclusion.
And the moderate support for the exclusion for the scenario of what?
Of it's both scenarios. It's the LR for both.
Got it. Okay. All right. And did you do any sort of grouped comparison for this sample?
No, we wouldn't, based on our SOPs. Those would only be for results that have both comparisons giving inclusionary LRs.
Okay, so I see since there's an exclusionary LR for Gerhardt Konig, then you wouldn't do the group samples.
No.
Okay. All right, I'm going to take exhibit 143 down. And could you look at exhibit 144 that you have up there with the paper with you, and I will get it ready to put up.
So the item is also white with brown stripes T-shirt. It's sample 2 of 6, stain on the exterior right chest, 13105230Q2.
And could you show us on Exhibit 29, which is, I think, standing up behind you, where that sticker is labeled on the exhibit?
It appears to be from this portion of the item.
Thank you. I'm going to publish now the visual aid states Exhibit 144. Okay, Mr. Henderson, could you walk us through what the results of for this stain, the stain that you just showed us where it was on the shirt?
So this is similar to one of the other ones. There's two likelihood ratios here. Maybe I can just kind of go over the summary of them instead of like going over every single part of it instead.
Sure.
So for the first comparison, these DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig contributed the DNA than if one unknown individual contributed the DNA. This provides very strong support for inclusion. And then the second one is a manual exclusion of the comparison to Gerhardt Konig. So Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor to the DNA profile.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to take.
I'm sorry. Can I just assuming one contributor? I have to add that to the statement. Sorry.
Sure. No problem. Thanks for clarifying. Did we get through a good summary of this chart?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to take this chart down. And as I get the next one ready, states 145. Could you let us know what question sample that one is?
So following the trend, this is also from the white with brown stripes t-shirt sample 3 of 6, stain on exterior front bottom left, 13-105230Q3.
Okay. And one more time, Mr. Henderson, could you show us on the t-shirt where that sticker is labeled?
It appears to be from this portion of the item.
Thank you for demonstrating. Okay, I'm going to publish now States Exhibit 145. Okay, Mr. Henderson, could you explain what the DNA probabilistic genotyping results were for this sample?
So if you look at this one's a little bit different since we have assumed contributors now. So I kind of talked about when we assume a contributor, we're kind of putting their profile in the interpretation up front. And the reason for this is the case information suggested that the t-shirt came from Gerhardt Konig.
Okay.
And based on a couple of other conditions that were met, we ended up assuming Gerhardt Konig or conditioning on Gerhardt Konig for the interpretation of this. So assuming two contributors, the DNA results the DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig and Gerhardt Konig contributed DNA than if Gerhardt Konig and one unknown individual contributed DNA. This provides very strong support for inclusion.
Okay. And just to follow up, you said that there was some conditions that were met that allowed you to assume that Gerhardt Konig was a contributor to the sample?
Yes, based on our SOPs. I don't know if you'd like me to get into those specific conditions.
How technical does it get?
A little technical.
Okay. Okay. Those conditions are part of the standard operating procedures?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And those conditions have been studied in the validation study before StarMix started being used?
That's correct. These are all set up in from the validation study. So, yeah, if these conditions are met, then we can go ahead and condition on a certain individual.
Understood.
It's a good time for recess, Mr. Gardner.
Okay, let's take a recess.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let's take our recess. Ms. Fisher will come get you about 10 minutes, so 10 minutes before you leave your notebooks on the chair. All right?
Protect people, and there may be additional information we'd like to provide to the court.
Okay, this is what I'd like to do then. For now, I'll schedule just a hearing at 2 o'clock on Monday,
That'd be great.
and I'll come in on Sunday to read whatever supplemental information you might want to present. If, so noon, I'll be in at noon on Sunday. If, after talking with your tech people, that we don't need to have a hearing,
Right.
could you also
Absolutely.
let the
We'll
court
let the
and
court
council know?
100%, Your Honor. Thank
Okay.
you.
So
And like I said, we'll hear back, and we'll let you know either way. And if there's something to add, we can do it at 2. If not, then I'll let you guys know.
I think because the timing is so short, I want to calendar it. At least we have it. Ready, and if you decide that we don't need to have a hearing, you just let everybody know, and we'll just take it off calendar.
Will do. I appreciate it, Your Honor.
Okay, so we'll do that. So we'll make arrangements for Dr. Konig to be transported back on. Doctor, you want to be here?
Well, yeah, 1 second.
He wants it.
Yeah, actually, and there's a reason for that. We have a visit that morning, and they'll transport him early if not. So we'll waive his presence for the purpose of that hearing, so I can still see him in the morning and then come here after.
You okay with that, Doctor? Okay, we'll waive your presence for Monday's hearing. Yes, we did.
Thank you.
Recess.
Off the record, Judge?
Yeah. We are now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
Stated by Executive Gerhardt Konig, 20 CPC 25-373. Dr. Konig is present in court with all 4 counsel of record. All jurors are back in the courtroom. Mr. Scott Henderson is on the stand and still under oath. And Mr. Garner, you may continue with your direct examination.
Okay, welcome back, Mr. Anderson.
Hi.
All right, let's keep going where we jumped off. So we'd finished with sample number 3 on item 13, the T-shirt. Could you let us know what the name of the next sample is that you did the probabilistic genotyping testing for?
Could you say the exhibit number?
146, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This would be white with brown stripes T-shirt sample 4 of 6. Stain on exterior front bottom right 13-105-230 Q4.
And could you show us on the exhibit behind you where that sticker is located?
It would be approximately in this area.
Thank you for demonstrating. I'm going to publish now, states 145. And Mr. Henderson, we've gone through a couple of these now. Could you kind of walk us through generally through the results of the probabilistic genotyping tests with regards to this sample that you just showed us on the shirt?
Sure. So I can just give the number of contributors. So assume contributors, assuming 2 contributors, and Gerhardt Konig as the assumed contributor in this sample. The DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig and Gerhardt Konig contributed DNA than if Gerhardt Konig and 1 unknown individual contributed DNA. This provides very strong support for inclusion.
And the person of interest being with the support for inclusion is again?
Arielle Konig.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to take 146 down. Mr. Anderson, could you look at states 147 and as I'm preparing the exhibit, could you let us know what the name of the sample location was?
This would be white with brown stripes T-shirt sample 5 of 6, stain on exterior back top 13-105-230 Q5.
Okay, and could you show us on exhibit number 29, to the other side of the shirt, and show us where that tag is?
It appears to be in this area.
Thank you for demonstrating. And now publishing states 147. All right, could you walk us through your results for the sample you just displayed on the shirt?
So assuming two contributors with Gerhardt Konig also an assumed contributor in the sample, the DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig and Gerhardt Konig contributed DNA than if Gerhardt Konig and one unknown individual contributed DNA. This provides very strong support for inclusion.
And for the inclusion of which person of interest again?
Arielle Konig.
I'm going to take Exhibit 147 down. Could you move on, Mr. Henderson, to Exhibit 148 and let us know the sample that is being discussed on that one?
This is white with brown stripes t-shirt, sample 6 of 6, stain on exterior back center, 13105230Q6.
And could you show us on the T-shirt, States Exhibit 29?
This appears to be the area that the sample is taken from.
Okay, thank you for demonstrating on the shirt. And again, for each of these that you're looking at, is there a sticker labeling that you're looking at?
Yes, I'm looking for the identifying sticker that my colleague would have put on while she was sampling.
I'm going to publish now for visual aid purposes, States Exhibit 148. Mr. Henderson, could you explain to us our probabilistic genotyping results with regards to the sample that you just showed us on that T-shirt?
So assuming number of contributors is 1, so assuming 1 contributor, for the first LR, the DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig is a contributor than if one unknown individual is a contributor. This provides very strong support for inclusion. And going to the next, appears to be a manual exclusion. Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor to the DNA profile.
Okay. I'm going to take States Exhibit 148 down. And I'm going to retrieve States Exhibit 29 to view the T-shirt. And I'm going to switch it out for States Exhibit 30. Mr. Henderson, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as States Exhibit 30 for the next set of questions.
Thank you.
Okay, and then could you review Exhibit 149 in front of you and let us know what sample that is?
So this is gray-blue shorts, sample 4 of 6, stain on exterior front right top, 1410523Q4.
Okay. And could you show us on States Exhibit 30, which is an evidence, where that is located?
Sample Q4 appears to be from this area right here.
Okay, thank you for demonstrating. All right, I'm going to now publish. I'm sorry. I'm going to show. And we're talking about Q4 again, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. I'm going to show Defense Counsel States 149.
Thank you.
And publish. Okay, Mr. Henderson, could you walk us through the DNA testing results using the PG system for that sample you just showed us on the shorts?
So for the first likelihood ratio, assuming 1 contributor, the DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig contributed DNA than if one unknown individual is a contributor. This provides very strong support for inclusion. Also, again, this appears to be a manual exclusion of Gerhardt Konig. Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor to the DNA profile.
Okay. I'm going to move on now.
DNA profile.
Okay. I'm going to move on now. Could you look at States 150, Mr. Henderson? And could you let us know where that sample was from according to your chart?
This would be gray-blue shorts, sample 5 of 6, stain on exterior front middle right, 14105-230Q5.
Okay. Could you show us again on the shorts where that sample is?
It appears to be from this area.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. And then I'm going to publish now states 150. And could you explain what the DNA results for that sample on the exterior front middle right of the shorts you just showed us? Could you explain what the results were?
So similar to the last one, assuming one contributor for the first likelihood ratio, the DNA results obtained are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig is a contributor than if one unknown individual is a contributor. This provides very strong support for inclusion. And again, for the second comparison, it appears to be a manual exclusion. Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor to the DNA profile.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Henderson. I'm going to take Exhibit 150 down. And keep chugging on through as best we can. Could you look at and review states 151? And let us know where that sample was from again.
Also from the gray-blue shorts, sample 6 of 6, stain on exterior right front left, 14105-230Q6. It appears to be from this area.
Okay, and you're demonstrating on States Exhibit 30 right now.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to publish States Exhibit 151. Mr. Henderson, could you walk us through the results that you got using the probabilistic genotyping for the sample you just showed us on those shorts?
Assuming two contributors for the first likelihood ratio to Arielle Konig, the DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig is a contributor. Arielle Konig and one unknown individual are contributors than if two unknown individuals are contributors. This provides very strong support for inclusion. Going to the second one, a likelihood ratio is calculated compared to with the reference sample Gerhardt Konig. These DNA results are approximately 1,660 times more likely if two unknown individuals contributed DNA than if Gerhardt Konig and one unknown individual contributed the DNA. This provides moderate support for exclusion.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I'll take that exhibit down, and I'm going to retrieve States Exhibit 30 from you, because we finished up with the shorts, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. There's a couple more swabs, yeah?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Could you review States Exhibit 152 and let us know where that swab is from?
So these are swabs stained from plant off trail. The sample is 3105230Q1.
Okay. I'm going to publish now States 152. And could you walk us through your probabilistic genotyping results for the swabs from stain from plant off trail?
So assuming two contributors and no conditioned contributors, no assumed contributors, for the first likelihood ratio, these DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig and one unknown individual are the contributors than if two unknown individuals are the contributors. This provides very strong support for inclusion. Going to the second comparison, the LR resulted in a likelihood ratio of less than or equal to 0.0001, which is exclusion. So our conclusion is Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor to the DNA profile.
Got it. Next one, could you review State's Exhibit 153 and let us know where that swabbing was from?
This was swabs from stain from plant from leaf on trail. Sample 4105230Q1.
Okay. And now publishing States 153. Can you walk us through your results for this one?
So it appears that this result came from the second of the two reports. And at this point, we had taken out the manual exclusion part of the probabilistic genotyping table, and it was included as a statement instead outside of the report. So I can still give that result, even though it's not in the table.
Okay.
So that one was Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor from a manual exclusion. And as for the likelihood ratio, assuming one contributor, the DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig is a contributor than if one unknown individual is a contributor. This provides very strong support for inclusion.
Okay. I'm going to take this exhibit down. Move on to States 154. Could you review that and let us know where that sample was from?
This is swabs from stain from tree branch, sample 5105230Q1.
Okay. Sorry, 1 second here. I apologize. Give me just a moment.
Take your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to publish States 154 right now. Could you walk us through your results for the swabs from stain from tree branch?
So again, the situation appears to be a manual exclusion, which would have appeared outside of the table itself. So Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor to the DNA profile obtained. And as for the likelihood ratio, assuming one contributor for Arielle Konig, these DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig contributed DNA than if one unknown individual contributed. This provides very strong support for inclusion.
Okay. I'm going to take that exhibit down. And last swabbing. Could you review States Exhibit 155 in front of you and let us know where that swab was from?
This would be swabs from stain from ground under bush, sample 6105230Q1.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to publish now States Exhibit 155. Okay, could you walk us through the results for this swab from stain from ground under bush?
Again, appears to be a manual exclusion for the comparison to Gerhardt Konig. Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor to the DNA profile obtained. And as for the LR, assuming one contributor, this would be for Arielle Konig, DNA results are approximately 1 trillion times more likely if Arielle Konig contributed DNA than if one unknown individual contributed DNA. This provides very strong support for inclusion.
Okay. Let me take State's Exhibit 155 down. Mr. Henderson, in your report, did you note which samples tested positive for human blood?
I did.
For every sample that tested positive for human blood, what was Arielle Konig's likelihood ratio?
The likelihood ratio for those particular samples was approximately 1 trillion, or very strong support for inclusion.
Did everything you testified to occur in the city and county of Honolulu, state of Hawaii?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Mr. Otake, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Henderson.
Hi.
All right, I don't have, I'm not going to take a really long time with you. I know it's been a long day for everyone, but I do have some questions. So, first of all, I just want to, when I asked you earlier during your qualifications part about the issues with the audit when you were working there, the point was simply that, well, let me rephrase that. So there were some issues before, right? Yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and then to your credit of what do you call you guys? What do you call yourselves? B what?
The Forensic Biology Unit, FBU.
Yeah. So to the credit of the FBU, after the audit pointed out these issues, you guys worked to fix them and get to a better place. Yes.
Yes, we addressed all the findings that were presented to us and provided plans to address them, and these were accepted by the accrediting body, and we followed through with any of the changes that they asked us to perform.
Right. And so to your credit, there were some issues, you fixed them, and now, from the end of 2024 on, now this new system, and at least you're confident that it's working properly, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And you have a lot of experience in DNA. How long have you been doing this, sir?
Since 2013.
Okay, so over 10 years, yes?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, thank you. So just some questions about some of what you talked about. You just at the end mentioned in the instances where you did test for blood, you just talked about what the results were when you did test for blood, yes?
So I didn't actually do the blood testing. That would be the previous analyst.
Ms. Amarin,
Ms.
right?
Amarin, yes, that's correct. I did look at the reports, and specifically for that question, checked if a conclusion was positive for human blood. I checked what the LR was for that particular sample
Sure.
with that conclusion, and confirmed that those were the LRs for those particular samples.
And you both jointly signed the report, yes?
That's correct.
Okay. So just let me ask you this: when you test, when you're doing the testing and you test for something, for example, if you test in a swab or an item for the presence of blood, and it comes back negative, you document that in your report, yes?
Yes, that would be documented, yes.
And so, for example, on the blue-gray shorts, sample 1, 2, and 3, there was testing for screening for the presence of human blood, and it was negative, and that was documented in your report, yes?
I would have to check the report.
If that would be fine with me, is that okay, Your Honor?
Yes.
Is that it behind him over there?
The binder behind you.
Okay. Wait. And I'm specifically, sir, talking about, I guess it would be the Bates stamp. Oh, I guess page 11 out of 197. Let me know when you're there.
Bear with me.
Yeah, take your time.
I'm sorry, do you happen to know which request this was from? Could you repeat the sample?
It is
information.
the gray blue short sample 1 of 6, 2 of 6, and 3 of 6 on the bottom of page 11 of 197.
Defendant's 197 or state's 197?
I was able to find it.
The
sorry.
report,
Yes.
there's 197 pages in the report, Your Honor. Sorry, page 11 out of 197. You see it there?
And sorry, you said which sample?
Samples 1 of 6, 2 of 6, and 3 of 6.
Yes.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
so I'm just asking, like, if you test for the presence of blood
Mhm.
and it's negative, then you document it in the report, correct?
Yes, that appears to be the conclusion on the report.
Okay. So then, if you go to, sir, if you go to page 4 of 197, and this is the swabbing from the unstained area on the rock. Let me know when you're there, please.
Yes.
Okay. So there's the rock, item number 2, yes?
Yes.
And Ms. Amron testified that she swabbed a stained area and an unstained area. Okay? And this is about the unstained area. This is what I'm asking about. And it says, for the unstained area, screening for the presence of human DNA was positive. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And and she testified, but there wasn't screening done on the unstained area for the presence of blood, correct?
I would have to look through the report. I think asking her might be more
Right.
accurate.
But at least here, it doesn't say that the screening for the presence of blood was negative, right?
I don't see that conclusion
Okay.
on the report. Yeah.
And as you indicated, if it's in your FBU, practice is if you screen for something and it's not there, you actually write, screening for blood was negative, correct?
If if a test was done and a result was obtained, we would typically include that on the report.
Okay.
Yes.
And here for the unstained portion of item 2, it doesn't mention a negative blood finding. It just says screening for the presence of human DNA was positive, correct?
Again, I'm not. I understand what
asking you
you're.
what it
Yeah,
says.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just asking you what it says. It says screening for
Right.
the presence of human DNA was positive, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what's on the
All right.
report. Yeah.
So, that being said, I want to ask you a little bit more about this and some of your testimony. You talked about, sir, the likelihood ratio. You call it the LR, right?
That's correct. Yes.
And it can range from 1 to a trillion and even beyond a trillion, but you guys only measure up to a trillion, right?
We calculate the LR, but we just report at the reporting cap. So approximately 1 trillion could
Right.
mean LRs that exceed that
As you
that
indicated,
actual
right?
number. Yes.
And so the likelihood ratio. Let me ask you this: Does StarMix is it like a software or is it a machine or what? What is
It's a software program,
Okay.
so we would run that program on a computer.
Yeah, and it's a company. It's a private company that makes this software program. Yes.
Yes, we could consider them a private company. They're kind of part of the apparatus of the New Zealand government. So I believe they're nonprofit.
Yeah. But in any event, they're not part of HPD, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And StarLinks puts out information about their system and how to use it and information about the system. Yes.
Yes, as far as I know.
And isn't it true in DNA probabilistic genotyping, like StarMix, I'm calling StarLinks is the Wi-Fi on Hawaiian Air,
Right,
right? So
yes.
sorry. In DNA probabilistic genotyping, like StarMix, a higher quality and quantity of DNA sample can lead to a higher and more informative likelihood ratio, yes?
Generally, yeah, you could expect higher likelihood ratios with the more DNA that's present in a sample.
The more DNA present in the sample, you can expect a higher ratio. Yes?
Generally speaking, yes.
Now, if we could, I'm going to ask Mr. Garner for some assistance here because it's his exhibit. Could we please pull up 142 in the form that it was? I'm sorry, maybe 140.
Which exhibit?
Sorry, I'm sorry. 142? Yeah. Yeah, sorry, page 2. 1 second. This is page 2 of 2. Page 2 of 2 of 142. Okay. Okay, if we do page 2. Thank you. Okay, sir, this is page 2. And I'm sorry, maybe we should go to page 1 so we can show what we're dealing with. Okay? Okay. So this is, you see at the top there it says rock sample 2 of 2 swabbing from unstained area?
Yes.
Okay. So there was a unstained area of the rock that was swabbed by Miss Amarin, yes?
I believe so, yes.
And that swab had DNA from 2 people, correct?
Yes, it was assessed at 2 people.
And this was the unstained portion of the rock, DNA of 2 people, correct?
It was evaluated, yes,
Yes.
with a number of contributors of 2.
Then that sample was then tested through the StarLink system by you, yes?
StarMix, yes.
StarMix.
Yes.
Okay? StarMix, not the Hawaiian Wi-Fi. Okay? And the results came out that our Arielle Konig, there was a 1 trillion likelihood ratio that her DNA was on the unstained part of the rock, yes?
The profile, the DNA profile can be, it was, the LR kind of tells us what support for observing the profile itself, not necessarily who contributed the DNA to that to the unknown sample.
But for Arielle Konig, where you see where it says very strong support for inclusion?
Yes, that is the LR for that particular
Yeah.
comparison.
And
Yes.
what that means is very strong support for inclusion, that part of the DNA on the rock, the unstained part, was Arielle Konig, correct?
That's almost a true. That's not necessarily a true statement. We have to. So a very subtle distinction regarding saying somebody is on.
Tell me the wording. Tell me the wording.
So
When it says very-
observing the profile is more likely
Okay.
if one scenario is there's more support for one scenario over the other. Not if that person is on there, it's more likely.
It's 1 trillion times very strong support for inclusion that Arielle Konig's profile is observed in the DNA in that sample, yes?
That we observe the DNA profile.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from that same swab, from the unstained area of the rock, Gerhardt Konig was 290 was his likelihood ratio, yes?
Yeah, the comparison to that reference sample was 290, yes.
Okay. And then Okay. And this unstained area of the rock, as indicated in the report, was not tested for blood. Well, was not, at least the results on the page I just asked you to look for, wasn't about blood, but it was about the presence of human DNA. Yes?
I did not see a conclusion for the testing of blood.
Correct. And I'm asking you about what you did see, which was this was related to screening for the presence of human DNA, not blood. Well, let me strike that. This was screening for the presence of human DNA, correct?
Yes, that was the result that was reported for that particular screening.
And Ms. Amron talked about that, like cells and things like that, yes?
Okay, yes.
Okay. Okay, 1 second. That's all the questions I have for you, sir. Thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Barner, any renumber?
Be quick. Mr. Henderson, I'm going to take the exhibit
Oh, thank you.
down as well. 142. Mr. Henderson, is it normal to screen for the presence of blood on an unstained area?
I'd have to double check our SOPs, but I believe that the correct SOPs were followed by Ms. Amorin.
Second question, seemed to be a little bit you wanted to explain about the context of what you can actually tell us with this kind of DNA testing. Can you tell us how any DNA got on any item?
No. We're only looking at the presence of DNA and making comparisons to the information from that profile to any of the information that we obtain from the reference profile. That does not tell us, we call that activity level. Those activity levels are different. That's not necessarily what the DNA is applying itself to.
Okay. Was that what you were trying to explain when Mr. Otake was asking you about somebody's being, a person being on an object?
That's not necessarily. That more applies to the likelihood ratio, and what the likelihood ratio itself, by definition, is actually looking at. It's the observation of the information on the evidence if either of the scenario is true. It's not the likelihood of a person being in that profile. They kind of might sound similar, but they're important distinctions. So I'm trying to recognize and correct any way that might be presented that could be the incorrect distinction for reporting a likelihood ratio.
Why is that distinction important?
So we aren't, the comparisons we make and the likelihood ratio that we obtain isn't going to answer if a person contributed to the unknown question sample. That would be what you all would need to determine. So having that distinction and explaining that and making sure that that's a very concrete and distinct thing to understand is important for the laboratory to convey to the triers of fact.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just very briefly. So just so I'm clear, because we spent 6 hours or so on this stuff today. You're not suggesting it's not helpful to help the trier of fact determine whose blood or whose DNA might be on an object, it's obviously helpful, right? I mean, that's why we did this for 6 hours, right?
Yes, well,
Okay.
definitely the likelihood ratio
Helpful.
is there to help the triers of fact make that determination, but we want to make sure that the likelihood ratio isn't telling you that determination itself.
Understood. And I appreciate
That's
that,
correct,
that
yeah.
ethical distinction, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
But the likelihood ratio is helpful to a trier of fact in that way, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's the intent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let's break. It's almost 4 o'clock. We're close enough to 4 o'clock where we should take our break. Leave your notebooks on the chair. Long weekend again, so you're not gonna come back until Tuesday of next week. Let me check the calendar. On Tuesday, I'm gonna have you come up or report at 9 o'clock. We should be able to start at 9 o'clock next week, Tuesday. The schedule looks like we're gonna be here for the better part of all 3 days next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so plan on it. When we get a little bit more refinement of the schedule, I'll share it with you as soon as it's available to me. Plan on being here for the 3 days of next week. Friday, of course, is gonna be a holiday. Between now and when you come back on Tuesday, same 3 rules, right? Don't talk to anybody about this case, keep an open mind, do not try to learn about this case outside of the courtroom. Do not tune into any of the news reporting. It starts to come on while you're having dinner. Again, turn off the TV, walk to the next room. I hope all of you have a good drive home. Enjoy the weekend. See you on Tuesday. All rise.